Dude, I thought I knew my house like the back of my hand, until last Friday, when it turned into the creepiest place on earth. My parents had gone for the weekend, and I was psyched for 2 days of gaming and junk food. But someone, or something, had a different plan. It started with a knock. Not just any knock, but one of those "I'm not selling cookies, I might eat you" kind of knocks. I was chilling on the couch, controller in hand, when it hit the front door. I figured it was probably Dave messing with me, so I ignored it. But it got louder. And weirder. It moved from the front to the back like it was checking each door. Curiosity killed the cat, right? Well, I'm not a cat, but I was stupid enough to check. Peeped through the front door's peephole, nothing. As I turned away, the knocking started at the back. This was getting real old, real fast. I grabbed my dad's old baseball bat because, I might need to smack a prankster, and flung the back door open. There was nothing but cold air. Just as I was about to lock up and call it quits, I noticed something off. A bunch of weird notes plastered on the door, saying stuff like "I see you and can't hide." Okay, not cool. This wasn't Dave's style. He couldn't spell hide if you spotted an H and the I. I decided to scout around the yard. The air felt like that moment in movies just before the jump scare. I had my phone light on and was streaming to my friends, showing off how brave I was. The shed in our backyard, that old wooden relic, had its lock busted. Inside, it looked like someone had crashed there, with a rotten blanket and some of my missing snacks. Yeah, someone had been living in my shed. I was freaking out, but I had to know if they were still around. The house felt colder when I stepped back in. Now, I could hear the soft thumping from upstairs. Every horror movie I'd ever seen told me not to go up there. I went up anyway. My room was a mess. This dude had gone through my stuff like a tornado. I heard a shuffle from the attic, the one place I hated going into. The door was ajar, which was a big fat nope in my book. But I had to end this night. I crept up the attic stairs, the bat shaking in my hand. Inside, it was like stepping into a different world. Old furniture covered in dust sheets, shadows thrown by the dim light of my phone. Then I saw him, a real, live person, not a ghost, but way scarier because he was real. He was huddled in the corner, wild-eyed, looking like he'd run through hell. He said he was hiding from people who were after him. Great, a paranoid stranger in my attic. He must have thought I was one of them because he lunged at me. Man, I've never moved so fast in my life. I dodged him, nearly tripping over an old trunk, and slammed the attic door shut, locking it. My heart was racing like a sports car, and I could hear him banging on the door as I stumbled downstairs. I barricaded the door with everything I could find and called the cops, my voice shaking like a leaf. The police came, and it turned out this guy was a fugitive, hiding out in neighborhoods like mine. After they took him away, I couldn't shake the fear. Every shadow made me jump, every noise had me on edge. It was supposed to be just me, my games, and some peace. Instead, I got a crash course in real-life horror. And let me tell you, nothing on a screen can ever match the fear of facing danger in your own home. I spent the next night at Dave's, too shook to stay alone. My parents came back, and I've never been so glad to see them. I used to complain about how boring and safe our neighborhood was. Not anymore. Safety isn't boring, it's everything. And that Friday night? It changed the way I see my quiet little street. It's not just home now, it's the place I survived the longest night of my life. It was midnight, and the only thing colder than the night air was the sinking feeling in my stomach as I left the office. The parking lot was deserted, a stark contrast to the usual hustle and bustle of the daytime. As I hurried to my car, the echo of my footsteps against the asphalt felt like a drumbeat, racing with my heartbeat. As I drove off, the streets were unusually quiet, blanketed in a thick fog that made the streetlights look like distant, hazy stars. I tried to focus on the road, but the silence was oppressive, heavy with anticipation. It wasn't long before I noticed something odd, a figure standing under a streetlight at an intersection. Even from a distance, his stare felt intense, as if he was looking right through me. With a deep breath, I told myself it was nothing, just a stranger at the wrong place and time. But as I drove past, I couldn't shake the eerie feeling that his eyes followed me. Trying to push the thought from my mind, I turned up the radio, the music barely cutting through the unnerving quiet of the night. Minutes later, I glanced in my rearview mirror and my heart skipped a beat. The same figure was now behind the wheel of a car, ominously close behind me. Panic fluttered in my chest as I watched the car mirror every turn I made. Each street I took, he was there, his headlights a constant reminder in the back of my vision. I thought about speeding up, losing him in the labyrinth of city streets, but something about his persistence chilled me to the bone. The chase continued, and his driving became more aggressive. He swerved dangerously close, as if trying to run me off the road. My mind raced. Was this some kind of game to him? My grip tightened on the steering wheel as I made a split-second decision to pull over. Maybe if I confronted him, I could understand why he was following me. As both cars came to a halt, he got out and slowly walked towards me. The dim light from the street lamp cast long shadows, making him appear larger than life. As he tapped on my window, his smile was chilling. "Lost, buddy? Need directions?" His voice was smooth, eerily calm. But his eyes, dark and gleeful, told a different story. Fear gripped me, but I managed to stammer out a response, telling him no, that I didn't need anything. I tried to pull away, but he grabbed the door handle, his strength surprising. "Come on, don't be like that. Let me in, it's a long night ahead," he said, his tone playful yet menacing. I shouted for help, hoping anyone might hear me over the desolation of the night. With a burst of adrenaline, I managed to jerk the car forward, his grip slipping from the door. My heart pounded as I sped away, the fog seeming to thicken with every breath I took. He didn't give up. His car appeared again in my rearview mirror, relentless. He flashed his lights, drove up beside me, and for a moment, I thought he would ram into my car. I've never been more terrified in my life. Just as I thought my luck had run out, I saw the flashing lights of a police patrol ahead. I've never been so relieved to see the police. I honked my horn frantically, waving my arms out the window. They quickly intervened, pulling him over as I watched, shaking and unable to comprehend the ordeal I had just survived. The officers detained him while I caught my breath, my nerves shattered. They told me there had been similar reports, that I wasn't the first to encounter him that night. As I drove home, the streets no longer felt familiar. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound made me flinch. Once home, the safety of my living room felt foreign. I double-checked the locks, peered through the blinds, and jumped at the slightest noise. The ordeal left a mark, a scar in my mind that didn't fade with the rising sun. It made me question the safety I took for granted, the normalcy of a drive home that turned into a night of terror. I knew then that some nights, the road home could be the longest drive of your life. I never thought a knock on the door could send a chill down my spine until that stormy night. We had moved to this house in the woods for peace, away from the city's noise, and until then, it was perfect. That night, though, with the wind howling like the cries of the lost, and the rain hammering on the roof, we felt the first tinge of fear seeping into our secluded haven. Elaine was in her studio, lost in her paintings, which were as wild and chaotic as the storm outside, when I decided to take a stroll around our property. My boots sunk into the soft earth, leaving deep impressions behind. Much like the marks I found on our windows when I returned, someone had been watching us, their face pressed close enough to leave a smudge. I tried to brush off the unease settling in my gut as I cleaned the glass. But then I noticed something else, carvings on the trees around our house, carvings that crudely spelled out our names. John. Elaine. Not deep, but deliberate. I felt a cold dread replace the initial unease. Someone was sending us a message. As I turned back towards the house, the wind picked up, carrying with it a faint, but distinct, knock. 3 slow, heavy thuds against our front door. My hand on the door handle felt like grabbing a block of ice. When I swung it open, a man stood there, soaked to the bone, his eyes wide and frantic. He begged to come in, claimed he was being hunted, his words tripping over each other, making little sense. I offered to call for help using our landline, not willing to let him inside. He glanced over his shoulder into the dark, nodded, and then as he turned to leave, the lights flickered and died. The power out, the house plunged into darkness, and our phones, our lifelines, showed no signal. It was clear this wasn't just a regular outage. The man, or someone, had cut our lines. The real terror began after the stranger disappeared into the storm. We heard at first footsteps, not just the creaks of an old house settling, but the unmistakable sound of boots on wooden floors, somewhere in the depths of our home. We moved, silent as shadows, from room to room, avoiding the windows where the occasional flash of lightning might reveal us. Glass shattered downstairs. He had gotten in. The game changed then. It wasn't about being scared anymore. It was about survival. I grabbed my old hunting rifle from the cabinet and handed Elaine her surgical tools. Just in case, I whispered, and saw her nod, her face set in a determined, grim line. We used every trick the house offered, hidden panels and old crawl spaces from its days as a prohibition hideout. We could hear him moving about, at times even speaking in a low, crooning voice, calling out mockingly, "John, Elaine, come out wherever you are." The fire started abruptly, a crash, a curse, and then the sharp scent of burning. A lamp, knocked over in his search or maybe set as a trap, we didn't know. Smoke began to fill the house, adding coughing fits to our whispered curses as we navigated through less familiar parts of our home. Remembering the old root cellar behind the house, I grabbed Elaine's hand and we made a break for it. The rain had turned the ground to mud, slick and treacherous underfoot, but we knew this land better than he did. Behind us, the glow of fire lit the woods like a beacon. We slipped and slid down the hill, the mud staining our pajamas, until we reached the cellar, hidden under years of overgrown ivy. He was close. I could hear him panting, cursing as he stumbled in the dark. I set a quick trap, a simple snare with wire I'd strung up for such an emergency. As he came upon us, his foot caught, and he fell with a shout. That gave me the chance to pin him down, my knee in his back, my rifle at his head, until we heard the sirens. Neighbors, seeing the flames, had called the fire department, who in turn called the police. They took him away, a known criminal, they said, wanted in several states. We watched as the fire was put out, the house a charred shell of its former self. But as we stood there, under the blanket the paramedics gave us, Elaine squeezed my hand. "We survived," she said, her voice firm, "and we'll rebuild. And we will. But I'll be laying more traps around the property, and maybe install a few more security cameras. Just in case the woods decide to send us another visitor."